Hello beautiful friends, welcome to my channel. I'm really glad you're here. In our last video, we explored the ways in which gender and performance go hand in hand, and explored how this has been affected as a result of stay-at-home mandates and social distancing. But for today's deeper dive, we'll be applying the principle of performance and self-making to examine the interconnectedness of all things, how we are not independent creatures, but interdependent ones. And at the end of this video, I'll leave you with a meditative phrase you can connect to your breath to help anchor you to the larger world when things are feeling unstable within yourself. So our wellness extends beyond our own bodies. That is, our wellness depends on the wellness of the earth, on the wellness of our communities, and on the wellness of one another. And we are bodies as well as minds, which is why changing one's body can sometimes provide us with precisely what we need, but also why no amount of psychological growth or self-understanding will be enough to compensate for a lack of material stability. In other words, the self can only really be or stay as healthy as the community in which it is located, because there is no self outside of community, or at least what it means to be a self is heavily influenced by communal narratives and values. Because of the hyper-individualism of the society of which we find ourselves, we will always remain capable of seeing ourselves as individuals, as noting our self-interests and personal preferences. Our economies, jobs, accolades, ideas of ownership, the very organization of our social order depends on making sure we continue to see ourselves as individuals. So at least for now, the much harder task is configuring ourselves as a healthy collective, to measure the cost of our own desires, to work towards harm reduction as much as we work towards personal success, and to seek the mutual prosperity of all life instead of relentlessly pursuing our own personal interests. In the same way that our gender is heavily contextualized by social engagement, ourselves are also wrapped up in our shared world. The virus is one dramatic example of this, how global our society has become, how the actions of so-called individuals have exponential consequences for our collective planet. But this is always true. Even in stories of great personal accomplishment or success, no matter how hard someone works to be successful, or how much of their energy or attention they devote to something, they are still dependent upon the earth for provision, on the stability of the ecosystem for their sustenance, on clean air and pure water, as well as on farmers for food, doctors for their wellness, caregivers for their life, and every other person who contributed to the infrastructure they needed to survive and succeed. I am not trying to diminish the fact that individual people are capable of accomplishing so-called great things, but that to understand even the most singular of accomplishments outside of our collective interdependency is an incomplete understanding. Perpetuating ideas of personal success, of self-made men, of property or land ownership, only further reinforce false narratives of meritocracy, wealth disparity, and division. Not only is a strictly self-driven conception of life socially inequitable and psychologically harmful, it's also simply dishonest. And while it is tragic that we have not restructured our communities to reflect our interconnectedness sooner, we must insist on reorienting ourselves now. We must become better at measuring the consequences of our actions, at creating sustainable accountability, and constantly remembering that whatever we do, we are all in this together. The interconnectedness of our world is not a negotiable reality, but what we can negotiate is how we incorporate this truth into our lives, how we allow our collective nature to shape our thoughts, our actions, and our world. There is danger in overlooking the self as well, namely that anyone who struggles to perform within normative standards risks marginalization or violence. When we only think of ourselves as a collective, anyone who stands out or is too different tends to become stigmatized. But it is not as if our current social order avoids these pitfalls. It just renders them less visible, more implicit. In our current society, we tend to gaslight marginalized people into believing that their failure to find success or happiness within the current structure is a result of their laziness or incompetence or some other bullshit. And not because we have organized a socioeconomic state which equates people's worth with their desirability and production value. What the lens of individualism has provided us is a rich appreciation for our differences, for our singular needs, the ability to speak more clearly about marginalization and exclusion. But we must learn to hold individual and collective narratives in tandem, to find ways of holding space for our differences without defining ourselves by them. An image of a tree seems useful here, to imagine each of us as separate, distinct leaves on the same tree. It is not that to speak of individual leaves is foolish or dishonest. Indeed, each leaf can be recognized, counted, and the needs and functions of each leaf are not the same. But to praise the success of even the most photosynthetic leaf, independent of the tree, is completely absurd. The success of the leaf depends on the success of the tree, and by proxy on the success of every other leaf. And it wouldn't make sense to collapse the distinction between the roots of the tree and the leaves of the tree and say, oh well, it's all the same tree, so it must need the same things to perform the same function. The success of the whole organism depends on understanding it both as a unified whole and as distinct parts. And until we learn to structure our societies in a similar manner, we should not expect to find ourselves much better off than a tree which has been stripped of all of its leaves, save only the highest performing ones. We must hold multiple narratives in tandem, to speak of diversity without division, to value deeply personal observation and experience as non-negotiably crucial to the collective. Neither the extremes of individualism nor collectivism will suffice, but at the moment, in America at least, there seems little risk to me that we will forget our individualism. So it is time for a course correct. To learn what we can from the values we have upheld, but recognize that there is much more to learn, and we must set about learning it soon if we hope to preserve this beautiful, interconnected planet. So I'll leave you with a meditative phrase, one you can connect to your breath, to help remind you that you are a powerful individual as well as a crucial extension of our interconnected planet. And it goes like this. So on the inhale, think to yourself, I depend on the world. And on the exhale, as the world depends on me. I depend on the world as the world depends on me. I depend on the world as the world depends on me. If you're feeling brave and vulnerable enough to share any response you had to today's reflection, I would love to hear from you in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video or it meant something to you, please like and subscribe. Your support means a great deal to me as I want to provide reflections which speak to you. And thank you for watching. I wish you peace and perspective. I love you all as I love myself, as we are part of the same world. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.